Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 41 of Quattroporte, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of sports and all the way up to super saloons, or sedans depending on how you want to refer to them, four-door vehicles of a high-performance nature. And in this particular pick, we're featuring a pretty popular model, but more so in real life than in the game. You don't see a massive amount of people using it. You do see some, and those who do use it tend to be big fans of it. I've used this car occasionally in around 500 pp races, and it is a good car to use, especially for a four-door vehicle. It's one of those four-door cars which can genuinely give vehicles from other categories, sometimes even sports coupes or sports cars, a great run for their money for its given PP. And the car is the Honda Accord, specifically the Euro R model, which we all know is essentially just a different way of saying a Type R, and this is the year 2000 shape model. Now, we've already of course featured the newer Accord Euro R, which was a good car, but this is definitely the superior vehicle. Now, I would say it's superior visually. I think it's a better looking car. It's a longer car than the newer version, not quite as chunky, more longer and slender, and it does have improved specs despite being an older vehicle. It's got a 2.2 litre engine, which is a little bit bigger than you'd probably expect for a VTEC, and it puts out a maximum of 425 horsepower. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge amount, given that it is turbocharged, but what it can do with that power is pretty impressive. It also has more torque than the newer model, 279 foot-pounds, so not a huge amount of torque, but again, it's a VTEC, so they don't tend to go for torque anyway. They tend to be higher revving, kind of like a motorbike engine. It's also lighter, 1,088 kilos, and has more horsepower per tonne, not far off 400 horsepower per tonne to be exact. As far as PP, it is quite a bit higher. The newer version sits quite nicely at 500 PP fully tuned. This car sits at 516, so considerably higher, given that the specs aren't massively increased. They are increased, but not hugely, but 16 pp more is quite a lot. As far as price, they're both very similar, but at 25 grand, both of them are fantastic value for money. So the question is, how does this compare to other sports and super saloons? Because we've already established it's the better of the two Accords, so how does it compare to others, sometimes others with more power? Well, it compares very well, but only under certain circumstances. In a straight line, this car is of course never going to be able to outrun something like a C63 or an E55 or an M5 or an XFR for overall straight line performance. That's just not going to happen. This car can do over 200 under its own power, but it's still nowhere near the kind of 250, 260 mile per hour top speed that you'd expect from those vehicles. That being said, however, for a 425 horsepower sedan or saloon, it performs very well. Now, it's a front-wheel drive vehicle, not too surprising for a Honda, and it does the front-wheel drive chassis proud. It's a very, very good handling car. Keep the camber and tone neutral, keep your differential settings relatively low, and it will handle like an absolute dream. It's easy to drive, has fantastic levels of grip, and due to the fact that it doesn't have an insane amount of power, it can actually cope with the power that it does have without shredding those tyres too much. And that's another advantage of not having as much torque. Torque is amazing, and it's a great thing to have, but more so in vehicles which are rear-wheel drive or especially all-wheel drive, because those kind of chassis can cope with it far better, especially around corners. Front-wheel drive cars just don't really need that kind of torque. It works against them more than it does for them. Now, in the case of this car, as far as how competitive it is, as I said, I have used this car on a couple of occasions for 475 and 500 pp racing, and it is actually competitive at that level because it's relatively light and it has just enough power to get the job done. Now, will it beat everything? Of course not. There's not really any given car that will always win in any scenario. There are some that come close, but there's not one which always will, certainly not in the production category. This vehicle though is a dependable performance car. It will serve you very well for racing, for fun, and if you set it up properly, even for drifting, because of that long narrow body, somewhat akin to a four-door body style Skyline. It naturally makes a pretty good drifter despite the front wheel drive. Just hold on that handbrake with the right settings and you can use the weight of the vehicle to really counterbalance itself and hold a really decent drift around corners. And given the look, you can do it whilst looking pretty good at the same time. This is a car which not only goes like it should, but looks the part as well. It's relatively understated, but it looks good at the same time. It's got that very 90s Japanese look. Now technically this isn't a 90s model, but it looks very much like a Japanese 90s performance car. That relatively understated but still very purposeful design. Personally, I don't use this car all the time, but it has served me well in the past, so I would definitely recommend checking it out. Obviously don't expect too much from it because you only have 425 horsepower. As I said already, it's not going to beat everything in a straight line, but if you use it on tracks which require a decent amount of straight line performance but combined with good handling, especially if you're going up against vehicles which might be rear wheel drive and spinning up those tyres a lot more, then this is certainly a good option to go for. But that's it overall for this particular review. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.